Hi, my name is Aya. You're watching Aya Reads, and I'm here to talk about all the new releases I read so far this year. All of them are romances, so all the new romance releases. I have 16 books to talk about. One of them was a DNF, so 15 that I started and finished, but I will be talking about the DNF too. Some of them lean a little bit more young adult, but most of them are adult romances, and they're all different subgenres. So I have a lot of contemporary romances, but I also have fantasy romances in here and paranormal romances. So basically what I'm gonna do is just talk about all these new releases from my least favorite working up to my favorite, and I'll have them sorted by star rating. So if you want to just skip to my favorites, then you can do that. And like I said, these are all the new releases I read in January, February, March, April, and a little bit of May too. Most of them I also vlogged for my new releases vlogs I'm doing. I'm gonna try to link as many videos as I can where I talked about these books, so that if you want to know more of my in-depth thoughts, definitely check those out, because since I don't want to make this video too long, I'm not going to go in depth with the synopsis and all my thoughts. So starting off with my DNF, and it was Lore of the Wilde by Analeigh Sbrana. This book, I still have my bookmark in actually. I got to page 224. I actually talked about this in my fantasy romance vlog that I recently posted, so definitely check that out if you want to know more of my thoughts. This follows a human girl, but in a fae realm, so she knows that fae exists, but she lives in a small city where only humans live. The humans are poor because they have to give tithes to the fae, and one day a fae shows up and he wants her, since she knows how to read, he wants her to travel with him to the fae realm, because there's this library there that fae cannot enter, but humans can, so that she can find like books about magic there, and there she falls in love with at least one person, but I'm pretty sure she falls in love with another one. At the point where I got in this book, maybe we met him, but there's not a real interaction like as far as romance is concerned. I DNF'd it because, well, at first I was kind of enjoying it, and the writing style was pretty easy to get through, but I felt like the pacing was completely off. She focused on things that in my opinion were not that important, and then she sped through things that I did feel were important. The romance was the worst case of insta-love ever. I didn't believe in their romance. There were some cute moments with them that I did enjoy, but overall I just didn't believe in their romance, and especially like the main male character did some things that I just could not understand, that he would sacrifice so much for a girl he barely knew. While I was reading it, it was fine, but I struggled to pick it up. That was the main problem. Like, I was not intrigued to continue on. And I read some reviews and it seemed like it wasn't gonna get any better, so I just cut my losses. Plus, this book already has has a very low average rating, and I knew this was probably gonna be a 2 for me, so once again, I just cut my losses and moved on. Then I had one 2-star, and it was The Best Man by Sam Mariano. So this one came out at the beginning of the year, and this one I actually read for my vlog of reading spicy romances. This is interesting. It's Sam Mariano, so you know it's going to be unhinged. And the part that bothered me about this book was not the unhinged part. So basically, this is about a woman who's engaged to be married. She's actually supposed to get married the next day, but she had a pretty terrible bachelorette party, so she decides to go to her fiance's place and just sleep there, and then hopefully have a nice wedding the next day. But then his bachelor party comes to his house, so him and all his brothers, his father, and like some friends. One of his brothers, the best man, comes into his bedroom, sees her sleeping there, and he tells her that he wants to give his brother, her fiance, a surprise, because her fiance has always dreamed of just having anonymous sex with a random woman. So he's like, let's do that for him. Let's have you pretend to be this anonymous woman, and let's have him fuck you without seeing you. So she agrees, but then instead of bringing the fiance in, he decides to bring his father and each and every one of his brothers to the bedroom to have sex with her, including him. And it's basically the first 5 chapters, basically him having sex with her, and then a different brother plus the father. It's unhinged, I know, and it's definitely very like, at first, like non-con, dub-con, like all that stuff. I do have to say, the reason this is 2 stars is not because of what I just described, because I knew that going in. I was prepared for that, and I was fine with it. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be fine with it in real life, but in fiction, I was fine with it. So that was the first 5 chapters. The rest of the book was supposed to be her HEA with the best man. That was just like the most unbelievable thing ever. And this is a novella, so usually novellas are unbelievable, but I still feel like if you're gonna give me this big of an HEA in a novella, there are things you can do as an author to indicate the passage of time. And I feel like she did not utilize that, because even the epilogue takes place like only 2 months after the rest of the book. So I just didn't believe their romance. I didn't believe they were gonna fall in love. I feel like either this should have not been a romance, it should have just been erotica and like maybe a happy for now, or she should have utilized time differently in her novella to make the HEA more believable. So that was 2 stars. But Sam Mariano, I do like her as an author. I have read Untouchable, which I really loved. So I'm definitely not giving up on Sam Mariano. Definitely not. I had 1 3-star, and it was The Witch Queen of Halloween by Kresley. So this is the newest in her Immortals After Dark series. This is a very, very long series. And usually I would say you cannot read the books without having read the other ones. This one, I think you can definitely read it without having read the other ones. You just have to skip the prologue and then you're fine. But this follows Poppy and Rook, and they have been skirting around each other for a couple years now. They had a date 2 years ago, but he left because he's a smoke demon. And smoke demons, basically, once they have sex with a woman, she has the power to summon them and they have to comply. And the only way to stop her from summoning you is if you forsake her publicly. And Rook doesn't want to do that. And on their date, he was actually summoned by another woman. So she feels betrayed and she has just been avoiding him. But she has this power that is going berserk. Basically, every Halloween, all these like horror movie characters come to life and try to attack her. And Maracata, a witch, and her book was like one of the earliest ones, tells her that she can cure her curse by going into this haunted house. He ends up going with her, and there they figure out what is happening with her power, and they deal with their relationship. First of all, Kresley Cole, even though she's one of my favorite authors, and I have really loved a lot of books in the Immortals After Dark series, I feel like this book did 2 things that I think that she's not the strongest in. First of all, I think her novellas are her weakest in the Immortals After Dark series. I 100% prefer her full-length novels. Plus, I feel like she doesn't do friends to lovers very well or second chance romances. She really shines with her hate to loves, and this was not hate to love. Because in this book, okay, so all the books are fated mates, and usually with fated mate books, but especially in the Immortals After Dark series, the guy will do anything in his power to get her. Like, if I look at the other heroes in her books, never would they allow for the heroine to be apart from them for 2 years if they can help it. And this guy did, which made me, in light of the series, not really believe in their romance. So this just was like, it might be one of my least favorites in the series, but she's gonna come out with another book in this series this year, so I am very much looking forward to it. And I'm obviously Kresley Cole. Like, I have given almost every single other book in the Immortals After Dark series 5 stars, so this is definitely an exception to the rule. It was a fun Halloween time. Like, I was not hating it while I was reading it. You fly through it because it's like only 160 pages, so I would recommend it, honestly. And this one I read also for like a new releases vlog, which, once again, I'm not gonna repeat myself. It will be linked either in the cards up above or in the description below. I had 2 3.5 stars. The first book was Puck Shy by Kayla Grosse. So this is the sequel to Trick Shot, I think. Yeah, Trick Shot. So in the first book, one of the heroes pretended to be his twin brother who's a hockey player. This book you follow that twin brother. And you also follow the sister from the heroine of the first book. Lucas, the hockey player, he's almost at the end of his hockey career and he's just been listless. He has not been playing very well. So his teammates suggest that he needs to let loose, and he takes him to this sex party. And there he meets this mysterious plus-size woman, and there they have this scene together, spicy scene together, with 2 other women. She knows who he is because he's a famous hockey player, plus he is her sister's boyfriend's brother, and he has been thinking about her. And then they meet each other again when he's hanging out with his brother and his girlfriend. But she doesn't really do long-term relationships, and she wants to have sex with multiple people, or at least like have group scenes. So, and she doesn't think that he would be up for that, even though technically their first sexual encounter did involve other people. But she thinks that He would not want to do that if she was actually his girlfriend. And since he really likes her, he decides that since she doesn't want to have a relationship with him, that he's going to offer her a job instead, and she's going to be his social media manager. But he puts his brother, who's his agent, in charge of her. So Lucas doesn't have the power to fire her or anything. And that's where they get closer and really get to know each other. And eventually they cannot really stay away from each other. And he tells her that it would be fine if they had other people in the bedroom every once in a while. So that's basically this romance. I do have to say, so this was a 3.5. I prefer Trickshot over this one because I don't, even in a novella, the way this was structured is just not my favorite in a smutty novella. Basically, they start with the sex and then they stay away from each other for a couple of chapters and then they get together again. I prefer, if you're gonna have a smutty romance, that the build up is the first couple of chapters and then it's just smut, smut, smut all the way, and not have an intermission of them not being together. So yeah, that was why this was a 3.5. It didn't do anything offensive. It was a smutty good time. Kayla Grosse does know how to write smutty scenes, but I think I gave the first book 4 stars, so this one I enjoyed a little bit less, so 3.5 it is. My last 3.5 stars was This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. So this makes me very sad because this is my first full-length Kennedy Ryan, and this is the second book in the Skyland series, the first book being Before I Let Go, and I have not read Before I Let Go yet, but I really wanted to read her newest release, and this you follow Soledad and Judah, I think. See, this already describes what, yeah, Judah. The fact that I forgot his name makes sense for my feelings about this book. Anyway, she has been married for decades, but her husband really hasn't been paying attention to her. And then a lot of things come to light. She finds out that he's been cheating on her. She finds out that he's been embezzling. And the person who figured out that he's been embezzling is Judah. Now she has to figure out what she wants to do with her life. She's now fully responsible for taking care of her 3 daughters, but she doesn't want to have a regular 9-to-5 because she still wants to be a homemaker and stay home as much as possible. So since her friend is a social media manager, she decides to give influencing a shot, and she actually is pretty successful at it. And she also really doesn't want, since she trusted her husband so much and since she did rely on him financially, she really has trust. She doesn't have trust issues with men, she just has issues trusting herself. So in light of that, she wants to date herself and not be in a relationship. But her and Judah do have this connection, and he really wants to give it a shot, and she really doesn't want to because she doesn't want to jump from one long-term relationship into the next one. And this book is basically her trying to figure out how to trust herself again, trying to figure out how to become a social media influencer, figuring out how to take care of her daughters. So this really, to me, felt like Soledad's story, and Judah was just a side character cheering her on from the side. And that is just not a romance to me. And since I am primarily a romance reader, this didn't work for me quite as much. Judah in any other book would have been, like, I mean, he was in this book. He also was very swoony. He was, like, perfect in my opinion. But we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him because this book was completely centered around her. It was her story, and he, like I said, he was just a side character. And even though we did get scenes from his point of view, mainly they revolved around her, but also her chapters also mainly revolved around her. So this just didn't really work for me. I do know that obviously Kennedy Ryan is very popular. I do know most of her other books are very much romances. So I will 100% be reading more from her. Hopefully I can read more from her this year. I mean, I for sure will be reading the first book, Before I Let Go, this year. And hopefully I can get another series or book read by her. But this just didn't work for me. I do have to say, when they did have sex, she did write that beautifully. Also, there are some beautiful quotes in here. So I do know that Kennedy Ryan knows how to write. Also, there was a side plot in here. I mean, he has 2 autistic sons. So I did really like that representation, and I think she did a wonderful job. So if you're more the type of reader that prefers if the romance is not center stage, I guess I would recommend it. But if you do feel like, if you're not one of those readers, then maybe skip this one. But if you did read Before I Let Go and really loved it, then I wouldn't say don't continue on with the series. But this just was a 3.5. I think a lot of people could enjoy it. Know yourself as a reader before picking this up. Like, if you really are looking for a solid romance, this is not the book for you. But if you don't mind a book that focuses a little bit less on the romance, then you might love this. I had 2 4-star books, and the first book is Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. So this is a fantasy romance that she released in February, I'm pretty sure. And this is a Norse mythology inspired fantasy romance. So you follow Freya, and she is the shield maiden, but her father always told her that she needed to keep her powers hidden because there was this prophecy that whoever controlled the shield maiden would become king of the land. So she is married to this awful man, and he ends up betraying her to their leader and telling him that she is the shield maiden. So the leader ends up marrying her because he thinks that marriage means control, but she ends up falling in love with his son Bjorn. This book I enjoyed. I read The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle Jensen, and I really love that series. And this book, like I said, I enjoyed, but I did have issues with the romance. Not necessarily, I just had trouble believing that romance. And my theory of why I didn't really believe in that romance was because this was single point of view. So The Bridge Kingdom was dual point of view, and I think that really helped with the believability of the romance. This book was single point of view, and I truly, first of all, I did not understand why Bjorn loved her, because she had, not that she had a difficult personality, but there's a plot line in here where her personality is pretty volatile. Like, she would say something one moment and then something completely different the next, or she would do something, or her personality would be one way and then the next moment it would be completely different. Like, I have trouble with those characters, and I don't understand how somebody could love those characters, because who's the real Freya then? You know what I mean? And I think it would have been clearer why he loved her if we got his point of view too. Plus, I just didn't really understand what was so special about him. Like, at one point, like, she, very early on, she talked about trusting him and him being the only person she trusted, and I just didn't believe that. But having said all that, Danielle Jensen does really know how to write a good fantasy story, and I feel like her world building was on point. Even though not everything is clear about the powers in here and the mythology and the world building, I feel like she told us enough for our first book, but still leave us with questions for the second book. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was 4 stars. So I was reading this while I was on vacation, so I didn't fly through this because I was interrupted a lot because I was doing fun things on vacation. I think I would have flown through this if it not for that. So yeah, I also read this one for my fantasy romance vlog, so definitely check that video out if you want to know more of my thoughts. My other 4-star read was King of Sloth by Huang. So this is the 4th book in her Kings of Sin series. I haven't read King of Wrath yet, so I gave King of Pride 3 stars, King of Greed 5 stars, and King of Sloth, this one is 4 stars. So this book, you follow Xavier and Sloane, and they have been teased very much in the 2nd and 3rd book. So you knew their romance was coming. She is a PR agent or like PR manager. He's her client, but she's technically hired by his father to kind of keep him in check because he's this trust fund baby and he constantly keeps spending money and not really working. He's just a party boy basically. Then his father actually dies, and in his will he says that Xavier will inherit $7 billion, but only if he becomes a CEO of something and if he does a good job. And there's this panel that will decide whether or not he's doing a good job, and one of the people on the panel is Sloane. First, he thinks that he needs to be CEO of his dad's company, but it's actually Sloane who tells him that it doesn't specify that he needs to be CEO of his dad's company. It just says that he needs to be CEO of something. So he decides to create this club, and she's helping him with that. They both have issues with their families. He has very strong issues with his dad because his mother died years ago, and he blames himself and his dad blames him for that. And she is from this very rich family. Something happened in her past. She feels very betrayed by that. Ever since then, she has no contact with any member of her family except for her younger sister. She's also known as this ice queen, a person who doesn't cry. I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed Xavier and Sloane. I was very much looking forward to their romance ever since I read King of Pride, and especially, but also King of Greed. I really enjoyed both characters, and I did enjoy their romance. This definitely is a hero falls first romance. Like, he is very clear that he likes her, and he's liked her for a while now. But I do have to say, and this is the first book where I actually had to read my own review for it before giving you my thoughts. Even though this is one of the books I read last, like this one I actually finished in May. So right now I'm filming this, it's May 11th. So it's not that long ago yet. I already forgot a bunch of my thoughts. So that just says enough. I don't feel like this book will stick with me long term, and I don't think this couple will stick with me long term. Even though, like I said, while reading it, I did enjoy their interactions together. It's just, I don't think this couple will stick with me in the long haul. Also, I have told you many a times, I sometimes have issues with billionaire romances, and especially this type of billionaire hero where, first of all, he's technically never worked a day in his life. All his money comes from his family, and he's the type of hero who just constantly throws money at the wall to solve his problems, and I don't like that. Like, for example, King of Greed obviously also had a billionaire hero, but in that book, money wouldn't solve his problems, which is why I enjoyed that book. Whereas in this book, he constantly, like every time he was in a pickle, he would just give people like hundreds of dollars to solve his problems. I don't like that because the stakes are very low in that case. Also, this is the longest book in the Kings of Sin series. This has 440 pages, and to me this did not need to be that long, especially comparing it to King of Greed, where I did feel, even though that is my favorite book in this series so far, I felt that book was too short, and in hindsight I would have preferred that 50 or 100 pages from this book were added into that book, because I feel like that book really did need to be longer, whereas this one could have been shortened. Having said all that, Anna Huang is one of my favorite authors, but she's not an author that I give 5 stars across the board. Like even the Twisted series, I've only given 2 of those books 5 stars, and then 1 got 3 stars and 1 got 2 stars. And also in this series, I still haven't read King of Wrath yet, but every single book I read in this series has gotten a different rating. But I do enjoy her writing, I do enjoy her smutty scenes, and her characters are very intriguing to me. So yeah, King of Sloth, I would say if you like Anna Huang, definitely pick this book up. This might be one of your favorites. Then I had one 4.5 stars, and it was The Veiled Kingdom by Holly Renee. This is her newest fantasy romance series, and the sequel actually already comes out in July, so it's not that long of a wait. In this book you follow Naira, and she is a princess to this kingdom, and its king is very brutal and ruthless. And there's this rebellion brewing because this is a fey world where the king gets tithes as basically people giving him their power. This rebellion wants to overthrow this king. A year ago, this rebellion entered the castle, and because of the havoc that wreaked, she was able to escape, and she's been living on the streets for a while now. But then one day she robs somebody, and then she gets caught and sent to jail, and then one of the members of the rebellion is in jail with her, and she actually gets rescued by her brother Dacre, and she begs him to take Naira with, and he does. And she actually has this rebellion tattoo that her friend gave her. While they're traveling to where the rebellion lives, Dacre realizes that the rebellion tattoo is fake, and he calls her a little traitor because of that. And this is basically their romance. He is the son of the leader of the rebellion, and she is the princess, but he doesn't know that, so there's also a hidden identity trope in here. He doesn't trust her, but he's very, very attracted to her, and she's also attracted to him, but since he is being a dick to her, she also hates him. Also in this world, everybody has powers, but she doesn't. Nobody in the rebellion has heard of that, and she's actually been tortured by her dad to get her to kind of reveal her powers, but she doesn't have them. And this follows their romance. This book I inhaled. Like, I read this book so fast, like I could not stop reading it. Like, this was so thoroughly entertaining to me. I was really enjoying their romance. I was really enjoying the back and forth between them. I was enjoying everything having to do with the romance. The reason this is 4.5 stars and not 5 stars, because if I was just rating it based on enjoyment, this would have been 5 stars. The reason I docked half a star is because this doesn't have any world building really. I would have preferred a little bit more angst, and the characters were a little bit inconsistent to me, but other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, if you're looking for a good, smutty fantasy romance and you don't really care that much about plot or world building, I would say definitely pick this book up, because that romance was fiery hot, I do have to say. And I didn't mind it because I tend to like those stories. The hero does something towards the end that is kind of unforgivable, but I don't mind that. I kind of like asshole heroes. So, but if you tend to have issues with heroes kind of doing, like if you really didn't like what Josh did to Jules in Twisted Hate while fucking, then you might have to steer clear of this book, but I didn't mind that. I kind of enjoyed those scenes. I don't know what that says about me, but hey ho. Also, it does feel like she just wrote down a list of things that the TikTok girlies love and just checked them off. There were some scenes that, was just put in there because people could share it like as quotes, smutty quotes. I do have to say I didn't mind those because I tend to like those. Like, I'm a basic bitch who likes those things. And it did to me feel like it was pretty authentic to what kind of character Dacre was. So I did enjoy it. Like I said, 4.5 stars. And I will 100% be reading the sequel when it comes out in July. And I definitely want to go back to her first fantasy romance series and read that, because I heard similar things about that as far as like world building plot goes. Since I really enjoyed this book, I think I will enjoy her first fantasy romance series very much. Now for my 5 stars, I do have to say half of the books I read, like half of the new releases I read, were 5 stars because 8 of them are 5 stars. So I do have to say the new releases are very much doing it for me. I very much enjoyed most of the new releases I read. In fact, the average rating, so the DNF I did not rate, but if I calculate the average rating of all the new releases, it's a 4.3 average rating. So that is very, very high. The first and my least, I guess, favorite 5 stars was A Love Story for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. So it's still obviously a 5-star read. I did definitely enjoy it, but out of all of them, the other books have just stuck with me a little bit more. Okay, so basically you follow Ricky Wilde. I was gonna look up her name, but it's literally in the title. Her family owns this funeral business, basically franchises, and she has always been the odd one out. She's the youngest, and she's very much a lot younger than the rest of her sibling or the rest of her sisters. They are these beautiful socialites, and she's basically, like I said, the odd one out. One day she decides to just strike on her own, and they live in Atlanta, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, and she goes to New York, to Harlem, and there she finds out a lot about like the Harlem Renaissance and stuff like that. One night she meets this mysterious stranger and she's very much intrigued by him, but he wants to stay away from her at all costs, and he tells her that she needs to stay away from him. But of course, fate seems to be bringing them together and they cannot stay away from each other. And this is basically a magical realism, historical fiction type story. I compare this book to 3 books. If you like those 3 books, I think you will very much like this one. If you like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Divine Rivals, and The 7-Year Slip, I think you're really going to enjoy this book. This one does lean more towards the contemporary side than the fantasies. I definitely did enjoy this book. It was 5 stars, like I said. I loved Ezra. I thought he was such an amazing swoon-worthy hero. So this book is structured in an interesting way where most of the chapters are in present day, but you do sometimes get a chapter that is set completely in the past, in the 1920s, and I really, really enjoyed those chapters. I wish we could have gotten more of those. I just was so intrigued by the past and the Harlem Renaissance. And I do feel like, so there's a big chunk in the beginning where it's all about Ricky and her actually dating somebody else. Like we see her meet somebody else, date him, have lots of interactions with a man that is not the love interest. In my opinion, that first part could have been cut down a little bit. We still could have gotten a lot of what happened, but they could have just been shortened a little bit because I don't care about somebody that she's not going to end up with and who's kind of a jerk as well. So if were going to give me the same page length, I would have just preferred that time spent on those past chapters as opposed to her dating somebody that she's not going to end up with. I did really love the found family in here. She does make some very good friends in Harlem. And I did, like this, definitely, it felt like true soulmates to me. Like I 100% believed that these 2 were soulmates. And we also, at first I wasn't sure because we do get different point of views, not just of the 2 love interests. At first I was kind of iffy about it, but I did really end up enjoying the use of different POVs. And like I said, Tia Williams has a beautiful, beautiful writing style. So 7 Days in June actually just shot up on my TBR. Maybe I'll actually read it in June. We'll have to see. My next 5-star read is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. So nobody's more surprised than me, the fact that this is this low on the list, because it's still 5 stars. It's still Sarah J. Maas. I still love it, but I think I have to come to terms with the fact that the Crescent City series is just not one of my favorites by her. It's my least favorite series by her. And as much as I did enjoy this book, and I know a lot of people have some criticisms of this book, it's still 5 stars for me. Like I don't think I share those criticisms, but it's still one of my least favorite 5 stars that I read this year. A part of that is my fault because I never read House of Sky and Breath when it first came out, and the plan was to actually read House of Sky and Breath in 2023 so that when this book came out I'd be ready for it. I didn't get around to it in 2023, so I read it right before reading this one. So I think that might have had something to do with how I think about this book months later in May. Having said all that, it's still 5 stars. It's still Sarah J. Maas. I did enjoy it definitely while I was reading it. In fact, the first half of this book I flew through, and I think that might also have something to do with it because the first half of this book I read in one day, but then I got really, really busy. Like this book came out in the week where a lot of things were going on with my work, and then on the weekend we actually went on like a weekend getaway with colleagues as well. So I had like a busy social life, busy work week, which meant that the latter half of this book I read in 2 weeks. The way I read it was weird too. So that might also have something to do with it. But like I said, it's still 5 stars. I did enjoy it. All of these 5 stars I would highly recommend. I did enjoy the fact that the way this left off, not spoiling it of course, but this does conclude an arc. So it doesn't leave on a cliffhanger, which I also appreciate. But I am very much looking forward to the next ACOTAR book, which I do think, and I think all of us think, that her next book will be the next book in the ACOTAR series. I know I am talking negatively about this book, but I'm really not, because I did enjoy it and especially liked it while I was reading it. But now in May, usually with her books, I still find myself thinking about them months down the road, and I do have to be honest, I haven't really thought about this book after I finished it, so I think that says enough. My next 5-star read was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second and final book in the Letters of Enchantment series, the first book being Divine Rivals. And Divine Rivals I actually gave 4.5 stars. This one was a 5-star. I really love this book. This series actually, so the first book you follow, and the second book also, you follow Iris and Roman, and they, in the first book, both work at this newspaper, and they are rivals because they both want a position at the newspaper and only one can get it. She especially finds him very annoying. Well, I think they both find each other annoying. Her brother is off to war in this world. Basically, this series is a mix between a historical fiction, a romance, and a fantasy. But it's very light on a fantasy. So if you're if you are big into high fantasy, I don't think you're really gonna love this. But in this world, it, instead of like World War I or World War II, where it's countries fighting each other, you have gods fighting each other, and they are using humans to fight their wars. And her brother has actually gone off to war, but she hasn't heard from him. So she's been writing to him, he's not answering, and she has this typewriter, and she's like writing to her brother and leaves it in the closet, and then somebody answers. At first she thinks it's her brother, but then she realizes it's not. And she basically has this magical typewriter that's connected to another typewriter, and they can write letters to each other and receive answers through their closet. And Roman soon realizes that it's Iris who's been writing these letters, and she doesn't realize that it's Roman. And they are kind of falling in love through these letters. And then she actually goes off to the war front to find her brother, because since he's not answering, she wants to find out what happened to him. And then Roman actually follows her to the front. That's why they ultimately fall in love. This book is a continuation of their romance. The first book ends on a cliffhanger, and this book I really enjoyed. Like I said, I do enjoy that the typewriters came back in this book and them writing letters to each other through the typewriters. I really did love it. I do have to say, this book came out, or this book I started reading around the time the Tortured Poets Apartment came out, and I just kept singing in my head the line, "You left your typewriter at my apartment," straight from the Tortured Poets Department. So I would say definitely, if you really love that song from Taylor Swift's newest album, read the series, because there's a lot of typewriting in here. I just really love these two. I think they're very cute together. Roman is different from most of the heroes that I read. Usually I tend to enjoy asshole heroes. I tend to enjoy these alpha heroes. This guy is definitely not that. He's a very sweet boy, and I just enjoyed him. Also, Rebecca Ross, her writing is gorgeous, like beautiful writing, and she does really show the cost of war, and I think it's a very realistic cost. I do have to say, the ending, without spoiling it, I feel like it could have been a little bit longer, because since she did such a good job portraying the cost of war during the war, I think she could have spent a little bit more time with the after effects of like what war does once it's over, like what the after effects of that are. So I do think that she could have spent a little bit more time on that. Also, Roman does make some stupid decisions, which is one of the reasons why I docked half a star in the first book, because both characters made some stupid decisions, definitely towards the end. This book, it was so minimal that it didn't affect my enjoyment or my rating of it. I really enjoyed this duology. I'm sad it's over, but I am very much looking forward to reading more by Rebecca Ross. I would highly recommend this duology, and it's only 2 books. I actually read the first book for my Reading BookTube's Favorite Romances of 2023 video. So if you want to know my thoughts on the first book, definitely check that video out. My next 5-star was Bride by Ali Hazelwood. So this is Ali's newest release, and it's her first paranormal romance. This book you follow Misery and Lo. Misery is a vampire, Lo is a werewolf. And in this world, everybody kind of knows about each other. So the humans know that there are werewolves and vampires, and the vampires obviously know that there's werewolves and humans, and the werewolves also know that there are vampires and humans, and everybody's kind of on a tentative truce. And one of the ways the truce when it comes to the vampires and the humans is every 10 years they send a vampire child in human territory to live for 10 years, and they send a human child in vampire territory to live for 10 years, and that child is called the collateral. And Misery was such a collateral. Like, she's lived 10 years in the human world, and because of that, she doesn't really fit in with the humans, obviously, but she also doesn't fit in with the vampires. And now her father, who's a leader in the vampire world, wants her to get married to the alpha of the werewolf. So this is an arranged marriage. At first she doesn't want to, but her best friend slash sister has been missing, and she thinks that the werewolves, but especially the alpha, have something to do with it. So because of that, she agrees, and she is sent to be another collateral, technically. So she goes and gets married to the alpha. It's basically their romance. So this is single point of view, as all Ali Hazelwood books tend to be, but every chapter starts with a snippet of Lo's point of view, and first of all, I love that. I really love this romance. You guys know that werewolf romances are my favorite types of romances. Werewolves are my favorite paranormal creature, so of course I was gonna love Ali Hazelwood werewolf romance. I really enjoyed Lo, but the shining star to me was definitely Misery. I thought she was hilarious. Like, I laughed out loud a lot throughout this book, and it was mainly Misery's thoughts and what came out of Misery's mouth. I thought she was such a funny heroine, and she's just as smart as any of Ali Hazelwood's characters. Like, this definitely, even though it was paranormal, it was also like she didn't let go of the STEM aspect of it either. Lo has a little sister, so he's basically a single dad to his sister, and she was cute as well. Her name is Anna, and she was so adorable. Sometimes authors don't do kids in books very well. I thought Ali did a great job with that. I don't think she has ever had kids in her book, so I thought she did a good job with that. I enjoyed the lore in this book. With paranormal books, sometimes authors don't have explanations for that, and that is fine, but I do tend to enjoy paranormal romances where there's an explanation behind why somebody's a werewolf or why somebody's a vampire, and Ali goes into that, and I enjoy that. That is like one of the reasons why I did enjoy the first book in Deborah Harkness's books, A Discovery of Witches, because they do go into like the DNA behind all those paranormal creatures. Same goes for the Shiver series. Even though I only read that book once years ago, I haven't reread it, so I don't know my feelings towards that book when I reread it, but I do remember really liking like the lore behind the werewolves and like the explanations why somebody is a werewolf. So I thought Ali did a wonderful job with that. I flew through this book, and this might be her first series because she set up different couples very well in this book. So I cannot wait to read those. This is a very good intro into paranormal romance. So if you've never read a paranormal romance, I would say definitely pick this up because you might enjoy them. And even if you have read a lot of paranormal romances in the past, I think you can still enjoy it because I've read a lot of paranormal romances and I really love this one. So highly recommend this one. And the last 4 books I'm talking about, I technically did rank them, but I think depending on the day, they could go in any which order because I very much enjoy all of these. I think there's a high probability they're going to end up in my favorites of the year. I thoroughly enjoyed every single book I'm gonna talk about next. So these 4, like I said, they are ranked for now, but ask me another day and the ranking might be different. They are all favorites, and I would highly recommend all of them. But I'm gonna start with Wild Love by Elsie Silver. So this is the first book in her newest series, and you follow Willa's brother Ford, and Willa, obviously the heroine from the second book in the Chestnut Spring series, and you follow Rosie, and they've known each other from childhood. Her brother is his best friend, and they were like childhood rivals, but they've always been intrigued with each other, especially him. He's been pining for her for years upon years upon years, and she's always been like this popular girl. He's been this shy nerd a little bit, but she's always felt pretty protective over him. Like, she was the only one who kind of could razz him. Everybody else was not allowed to make fun of him. This is a billionaire romance because he set up this like Spotify type thing, but he let that all go because of betrayals. Now he's moved back to Rose Hill, the only place where he really felt at home, to start this recording studio that pays artists a fair wage. It's gonna be like this whole thing where artists also can live there. Rosie's been living in the city for 10 years, but something happened at her job where her boss SAs her. She tells him that she's gonna go to HR, but he beats her to HR and they end up firing her. Her boyfriend doesn't react very well, so she decides to leave her boyfriend, leave her job, leave the city, and go to Rose Hill, where she finds out that Ford is back and she asks him for a job. He cannot tell her no, so he gives her one. And then somebody shows up at Ford's door. It's a 12-year-old girl telling him that she's his daughter, because when he was 19, his father is this famous musician, but he didn't want to just give him money left and right. So when Ford was 19, he wanted to go to this concert. His dad refused to give him the money because he wanted him to work for it. And instead of working for the money, he decides to donate his sperm. And she's basically the product of his sperm and her mom. The little girl's dad died a year ago, and her mom has been depressed ever since. And because of that, she's not really taking care of her very well. So she wants Ford's help. He cannot refuse her, so he takes her in and takes care of her mom and basically becomes this single dad for this 12-year-old girl. Rosie also helps and falls in love with the little girl too, and it's Rosie and Ford's romance. I really enjoyed this book. Like, I really loved Ford and Rosie. I loved the fact that he was such a pining hero. I love the fact that they were opposites attract. Like, they were completely different people, but I really loved how she was messing with his resolve and he couldn't say no to her. I love the little girl in here, and I loved how they both fell in love with her. Like, I loved how both of them had a relationship with her. I loved how Rosie called her little storm cloud. There were some diary entries in here from when Rosie was a teenager, and I loved reading them. And I loved how you could see from back then that she did find him interesting and that she did find him attractive. I enjoyed how he slowly revealed for how long he's been in love with her. And of course, just like every single Elsie Silver book, I love the combination between sweet and sexy. It does take a while for them to have sex, but when they do, it's explosive. Elsie Silver really does know how to write smutty scenes. Willa makes an appearance in here, so if you really love her in the Chestnut Spring series, definitely check this book out. I really enjoyed it, and this is going to be a series all about single dads, so I'm very much looking forward to reading the rest of this series. The next one comes out, I believe, at the end of the year, so cannot wait to read that one. This book did not disappoint in my opinion. Yeah, I'm really glad that I loved it. At third place is Funny Story by Emily Henry. So this is, of course, her latest release. And this book you follow Daphne and Miles, and basically they become roommates because their significant others dump them for each other. So basically, her fiance Peter has had this best friend ever since he was a little boy. On his bachelor party, she confesses that she's in love with him, so he dumps her for his best friend Petra, and then Petra dumps her boyfriend Miles. Since Daphne moved to Michigan, I'm pretty sure, for Peter, she really doesn't have anywhere to go. So she asks Miles if she can move in with him. So this is, of course, a roommates to lovers trope, which say less. That is my favorite trope. And not only do these two get together, they have the audacity to get engaged very soon afterwards. And then they have the audacity to invite their exes to their wedding. And one day, on that day where they get the invites, Daphne and Miles go out, and then they decide to RSVP to this wedding. Afterwards, Peter calls her and wants to be like the good guy and tells her, you don't really have to come if you don't want to. And then she's like, I'm coming and I'm bringing my boyfriend with, and my boyfriend is Miles. So now they have to fake date. She tells Miles, so she's a librarian, and during the summer, they do this like readathon for the kids. And she tells him that she's staying in Michigan until then, and then she's leaving. And he tells her that, she moved to Michigan for Peter. He doesn't want her to leave because of him too. So he makes it his mission to show her around town and to convince her to stay. So every Sunday they have these dates where he shows her around town. And I really love this book. This is my favorite Emily Henry so far, because I know Emily Henry is a very popular author, a very beloved author, but I've only ever given one other book by her five stars, and the rest have been less than that. Even though I get why she's popular, she's never really been one of my favorite authors. Her release before Funny Story, I also gave 5 stars, and it's my second 5 stars, but I think I prefer this one over happy place. This is just like everything I love. It has fake dating. It is the roommates to lovers trope. And I do enjoy the fact that both of them have things going on in their past and they're both flawed characters. But I still love that the romance was the center stage in this book. In my opinion, it is. Like if I compare it to This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan, that very much felt off kilter. Like it felt like it was solely her story and the romance was a secondary plot. But this I didn't feel that way towards. I felt like the romance was just as important as all the other things that were going on. I really enjoyed Maas. I love the fact that they built their romance on a solid foundation of friendship first. Like that made me believe in their romance so much because they knew each other through and through. And I loved how she described Maas, like especially in juxtaposition to Peter. Like Peter is this man that right away you notice how beautiful he is and how charming he is. Miles takes time to like, once you know him, that's when he becomes attractive, which is, I mean, sounds like a backhanded compliment, but to me it didn't feel that way because he was described as being conventionally attractive, but he kind of became mesmerizing once you really do get to know him. This book also made me laugh out loud a lot of time. I love their banter and I love the side characters. I love how she eventually made friends and I loved her friendship with those characters. At one point his sister shows up and I just love, like I was picturing them in their apartment, it being a very small apartment, but at one point 3 people were living there. It felt to me like it was a giant slumber party. I loved her job, obviously, and I did, like I said, both of them had issues in their lives, especially towards family. That was a very intriguing plot for me. One criticism I do have is this, I believe, is also single point of view, which had the effect of us knowing a lot about her and her issues with her family and everything about her, whereas his issues were only addressed surface level. Like I wish either this would have been dual point of view, and if not, then I wish we could have spent, like we could have had either one extra conversation about him and his past, or the conversation they did have, I wish we could have explored that a little bit more, and I wish they would have gone more in depth about his issues. But having said all that, this is one of my favorite new releases I read this year, and I would highly, highly recommend it. And I would say if you have stayed away from Emily Henry, I would say definitely pick this book up because you might really enjoy it. And especially if you really love the roommates to lovers trope, then you cannot go wrong with this one. On second place is a book that feels controversial to me, but if I look at the ratings, it's really not. But it is If You Hate Me by Helena Hunting. This book I really, really love. This book you follow Beatrix or Trix, and you follow Tristan. Once again, a roommate to lovers, and this is also a hate to love, also brother's best friend romance. So they grew up together and he always was teasing her. He never really paid her any attention, and he also called her Beat, and that stood for beat it. Like every time she was around, he just wanted her to leave. On the same day she quits, she also moves out of her place because her roommates are horrible. And now she has nowhere else to stay, so she asks her brother if she can stay at his place until she finds a place of her own. But he doesn't live alone. He lives with his best friend, Miles, and this is a hockey romance. They, like I said, they've always hated each other. But now Trix is all grown up and Miles notices. So they eventually end up hate fucking, basically. Friends with benefits, except without being friends. He has some trust issues, like big trust issues, because his mother left him and the rest of their family when he was 12. And he kind of feels like everybody's always leaving him. And he also feels responsibility towards his brothers, like he's always taking care of them. And she doesn't really know what to do with life. Like she has this passion for food and nutrition, but she took the safe option of like doing something in finance. And it's basically their romance. This is an asshole hero, I'm not gonna lie. But since I already said earlier in this video, I kind of like asshole heroes. I don't know why, especially this type of hero who's very emotionally repressed because of something that happened in his past. I tend to like those heroes. Once again, I don't know what that says about me, but I kind of like those heroes. Also, this is very, very, very heavy on the smut. Like this is, I would say 80% smut and 20% plot. But the plot we did get, I did enjoy, and I do really like this type of hate to love romance where they're actually like having a lot of sex while still hating each other. So I definitely can see this hero not working for a lot of people, but he definitely worked for me. And once again, this proves to me that the roommate trope reigns supreme because I really enjoyed this book. And a big part of that is because they're roommates. I definitely enjoyed this heroine. So this is my second Helena Hunting. The first book was Pucked, and I also really enjoyed the heroine in that book. She was just fun to me. I enjoyed her. And like to me, the smut scenes were very well done. I know there's a cucumber scene that a lot of people have issues with. I definitely didn't. I don't know. Like, I thought she, even though there was, like I said, a lot of smut in here, I thought the smut scenes were done very well. This hero kept pushing the heroine away every time he felt something because, like I said, because of his issues with his mom and people always leaving him. And also this book not only has a 3rd act breakup, it has a 4th act breakup. So I'm laying it all out for you. If you don't like any of the things I just said, then say wait. But I do have to say, I don't really like 3rd act breakups, and especially not 4th act breakups, but I definitely enjoyed this book, so that doesn't say everything. I felt like this book definitely needed it because this hero had so many issues. Like, he needed to deal with his issues first, and he had several of them, so he needed to deal with all his issues before he could be a good boyfriend to the heroine. I definitely enjoyed this book. It was very entertaining to me. I like both characters. I like their romance, and I like the smutty scenes. And the other couples were pretty well set up in this book. The second book, I believe, comes out in July, and I cannot wait. I believe it's going to be A Dad's Best Friend, which I cannot wait. Yeah, this is going to be all hockey romances. And Helena Hunting is slowly becoming one of my favorite authors. So yeah, I cannot wait to read the rest of her backlist, which I know her backlist is very extensive. So I have a lot of good books to read ahead of me. And my favorite new release I read this year took me by surprise because even though I enjoyed other books by this author, I have never given a book by her 5 stars, even though I did enjoy it. And I knew that there was going to be a 5-star in there because I usually fly through her books, and it's Just for the Summer by Ali Jimenez. So this book starts off with Justin going on Reddit. Basically, he has this question, but while describing his story, he divulges that his last 4 girlfriends, every time they broke up, they would find the love of their life in their next relationship. So he's basically the guy they date before they find the love of their life. Emma reads that and actually responds to him saying that she has the same problem. Like, the last 3 boyfriends she had, they would find the love of their lives in their next relationship. So they start talking to each other online. And then Justin comes up with this idea that maybe if they date each other, they would cancel each other's curses out. Once they break up, the next person they find would be the love of their life. So since she's a traveling nurse, she decides to go where he lives so they could date for a month, break up afterwards. But of course, things don't go as planned and they do end up falling in love. Both characters have serious mommy issues. So she has a mom who's basically neglected her entire life. His mom did something that gets her sent to jail, and he has to become the guardian of his 3 younger siblings. I really, really, really love this book. Like I said, it's my favorite new release I read. And I read the Yours Truly duology, and I did enjoy both those books because I flew through them, but I had some issues with those books that prevented me from giving it 5 stars. This 100% is a 5-star. I would say you can read this without having read the Part of Your World duology, but I would say this book, it gives you a bigger understanding because a lot of characters from the Part of Your World duology make an appearance in this book. So if you want the full experience, I would say read the Part of Your World duology first and then go on with this one. I really loved both Justin and Emma, especially Justin. He was such a good hero. Like, sometimes I say I like asshole heroes. Like, for example, Maas in here. I don't want to date a Maas in real life. Like, I'm a 30-year-old woman. I have no interest in this type of immature, emotionally repressed hero. Like, I can read it and it can be thoroughly entertaining. I don't want that type of hero in real life. Justin, however, I would be the happiest camper if I had a boyfriend that was just like Justin. He was so sweet, such a nice, truly, genuinely nice person. And Emma, was also very nice. Like, some of the things she did just endeared me to her so much. Justin was so sweet, so attentive. I also loved his brand of honesty. Like, he was honest from the very beginning. And I like that. I don't like a guy who's wishy-washy. He knew what he wanted and he was honest about that from the very beginning. I loved how selfless he was. I loved how he was with his siblings as well. I just loved how he put everything to the side to care for his younger siblings. And I also loved the siblings in here. Like, they were kind of scene stealers sometimes and I enjoyed them very much. I also loved how Emma eventually also bonded with the siblings. This was so compulsively readable. Like, Abby's writing style is very compulsively readable to me. Like, I fly through her books, and like I said, both characters have issues, and just like with Funny Story, I feel like Abby did a good job balancing the romance and the things that the characters have going on as well. Like, I just felt so sorry for Emma sometimes. Like, the things, like, even though Justin's mom did something bad that has very big consequences in his life, at the end of the day, she was a good person, she was a good mom. Growing up, she was like she took care of them, and she made one big mistake, but other than that, she was a good person and a good mom. Emma's mom, however, it was like very bad, very, very bad. And I just felt so sorry for her, and her reactions towards Justin were very realistic. Yeah, I fell in love with this book. I love the cameos in here. I love their romance. I was just rooting for them every step of the way. But I did understand why the third act conflict happened. Like, I did understand why she sometimes pushed him away. I really want to go back and read Abby's backlist now, and I cannot wait to read what else she's going to come up with. So yes, this was a very long video, I'm pretty sure. But these were the 16 new releases that I read this year. I would really love to know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were. Also, what was your favorite new release that you read this year? Leave all your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to say that you were here but don't want to leave a comment, leave me a sun emoji for just for the summer. And don't forget to like this video, and thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.